Shalom, my friends. We will say a few words of Torah having to do with the parasha that's coming up this coming Shabbat, Parashat Vayhi, which is the last parasha of the book, the first book of the Torah, the book of Bereshit. And it begins with the words Vayhi Yaakov be'eretz Mitzrayim sheva esrei shana. And Yaakov, our father, lived in Mitzrayim, in Egypt, 17 years before he passed away. Why is it so necessary to tell me that he lived? Since we are going to talk about the death of Yaakov, it seems to be illogical to begin a parasha with the words Vayhi, which means and he lived. Our sages explained that it is important that the Torah told us that. Why? To teach us that our father Jacob did not have an easy life at all. The only enjoyable life that he had was only the last 17 years of his life, that he spent again with Yosef, his beloved son, in Egypt. Otherwise, all the years before, 115 years or so, have been years of suffering for Yaakov. We all know how it started. After he took the blessing from his father Yitzchak, the blessing that in the beginning was meant to belong to Esav, his brother. Nevertheless, Esav was not worthy of this kind of blessing, so Yaakov had to take it because it meant the future of the Jewish people. He also took away from him by, of course, after Esav sold it to him, the birthright. Now Yaakov is the prominent man who will be the true father of the Jewish people. Nevertheless, Esav, his brother, hated him. Hated him so much that he promised himself that after the death of their father Yitzchak, he will kill his brother Yaakov. Rivka, the mother of Yaakov, the wife of Yitzchak, endowed with the power of prophecy, she had the Spirit of God in her. She understood the plan of Esav, that he's planning to kill his brother Yaakov. Therefore, immediately, she called up Yaakov and she told him to get out from the land of Israel, Canaan, and to go to her brother Lavan, or to her father Betuel. By the way, Yitzchak also joined his wife in telling Yaakov to leave. Why? Because in the meantime, Yitzchak understood that Esav was not worthy neither from the blessing nor from the birthright. Our sages tell us many things about the evil things that Esav committed. We don't have the time now to tell you everything. And therefore, however, he told Yaakov, go to fetch a wife for yourself. Until then, Yaakov did not marry until the age of 37. Why? Because Yitzchak and Yaakov, both of them could not tolerate the fact that a wife for Yaakov, the righteous, would come from the land of Canaan, known for its stupidities, for its crimes, and its abominations. Go to my family, Rivka said. Despite the fact that Lavan, as well as his father Betuel, both of them were idol worshippers. Nevertheless, they had what we call derech eretz. Since they came from a great family, so they were endowed with good character. Despite the fact that we know that the character of Laban was far from that which we want. He was a liar, and indeed he brought about his great power for falsity, and all this has been fallen upon Yaakov when he finally arrived by Lavan. When he came after several years of studying in Yeshiva of Shem Va'ever, Yaakov came to the house of Lavan. And the first thing was that he met Rachel. He fell in love with Rachel. She was beautiful. As the Torah says, "V'Rachel hayeta yifat to'ar v'yifat mar'eh." By the way, this was the first time now that he is separating from his father. Separation upon Yaakov is not easy, but he had to. Also, to leave the land of Israel was not desirable by any of them. Yitzchak never left the land of Israel. But Yaakov, although he didn't want that, but he had to fulfill the will of his mother and the will of his father. So now he is not in the land of Israel, he is outside the land of Israel. Haran. So he arrives by Lavan, he falls in love with Rachel, and he wants to take her as a wife. Lavan said, "No problem. All you have to do is to pay up by working for me 7 years." Yaakov said, "For Rachel, I'm willing to do that." And he spent 7 years of almost slavery, watching and doing everything and working with the utmost honesty, as our sages said. And as the Torah tells us, after 7 years, Lavan, following his usual character, he sent Leah, the second daughter of Lavan. Leah was not as beautiful as Rachel. Besides, Yaakov fell in love with Rachel. Yet, in that night, in the darkness, Leah came instead of Rachel. By the morning, Yaakov realized, hey, it's Leah. Oh my God. He goes immediately to protest by Lavan. How did you do that to me after I worked for you 7 years? Well, Lavan said, listen, my friend, I cannot give you Rachel, who is younger than Leah. That's not the way of the place. Our custom is first, you marry the old one, and then you take the younger one. You want Rachel? Work for me another 7 years. Yaakov agreed. Now Leah is his wife, but in the meantime, he's working for Lavan. Why? For the purpose to finally get Rachel. Another 7 years, working for him. Finally, he gets Rachel. And he gives another 7 years, so that's 21 years in the house of Lavan, working very hard. As the Torah tells us, day and night, he was watching over the cattle and over everything that is there. Finally, it's time for him to leave. His 2 wives are following their beloved husband Yaakov. Lavan, the story goes on in the Torah. Lavan protested that that they took away his idols and so forth. Yaakov swears that nobody took, but it was Rachel who stole the idols, the little idols of her father Lavan. By the way, we don't mention here Betuel, the father, the great father, because he passed away the day when Yaakov came. Why? To follow the plan of God. Lavan was the one who was given tremendous power, sometimes of prophecy, according to our sages. But the kind of prophecy that was used in a way that is total falsity. Okay, Yaakov Avinu lives, but now there is still a great threat. By whom? Esav. Apparently his brother Esav did not forget all these years. And Yaakov feared. But now he's in company of his 2 wives and children who were born. Even Yosef was born finally to Rachel, who was not able to bear children in the beginning. Only after God had mercy on her and she finally gave birth to Yosef. But in the meantime, unfortunately, Rachel passed away on the way to the land of Israel, in Bethlehem, near Bethlehem. Why is that? Because Yaakov, when he swore to Lavan, he said, let the one who took your idols die. Unfortunately, he didn't know that Rachel took them. So she perished. But our sages say that she had to be buried in that place, outside the land of Israel, out of nowhere. Why? Because our sages say that the day will come in the future when the Jewish people will have to pass by and they will be in trouble, and whenever they will be in trouble, the soul of Rachel would stand and praise to the Almighty for them. And the prayer of Rachel was greatly important, much more than the prayer of anyone else. That's the reason why she was buried in that place. But that's another case for another lecture. So let's go back again to Yaakov. Finally, thank God, he meets Esav. It's not as bad as we thought. They made a temporary peace, and they exchange gifts and everything. Very good. Nevertheless, Yaakov doesn't want the company of Esav, so he gets as far away from him as possible. Finally, Yaakov comes back to the house of his beloved earth, the beloved land of Israel. Vayeshev Yaakov, that's in Parashat Vayeshev. Finally, he's resting. And that's when the saga of his son Yosef began. No time for you, Yaakov. No respite for you. He suffered all these years, and he thought he's finally going to sit down and rest. Our sages said, Bikesh Yaakov liyishev beshalva. Kafatz alav rugzo shel Yosef. Yaakov wants to finally sit down in total tranquility, but then immediately the anger of what happened to Yosef came up upon him. And we all know what happened. Yosef grew up to be the beautiful young man in the house of his father, and his father Jacob did express a little more love for him than the other brothers. The brothers became jealous, especially the day when Jacob had to give him ktonet pasim, a shirt, a beautiful shirt that he made special for him. The brothers keep on looking at this apparent difference between Yosef and them in the eyes of Jacob, and they were invaded with jealousy. Everyone is definitely exposed to the danger of jealousy. That's nature of human beings. Nevertheless, the problem is how to overcome jealousy. In the meantime, the brothers of Yosef could not overcome the jealousy. Nevertheless, they were quiet until the day when Yosef came up and he started to dream. And he comes to tell the dreams to his father. And he says one day to his father, I have a dream that the sun and the moon and 11 stars are prostrating before me. It was understood that Yosef, in his imagination apparently, is imagining that one day his father and mother and his brothers will all prostrate before him. They all will worship him. Even his father, when he heard that, became angry. Vayigar bo Yaakov. He said, what do you mean? What kind of dreams do you have that we should come and bow to you? Nevertheless, the Torah says, Ve'aviv shamar et hadavar. And his father kept this in his mind, knowing with his great power of prophecy that this will happen one day. Our sages said in the Talmud, Masechet Berachot, that it could take for a dream to happen even 21 years and more. which is exactly what happened to Yosef. So now we know the rest of the stories. What happened? After the dream, this kind of jealousy that was already in the hearts of the brothers was intensified by a feeling of hatred. And the hatred grew up till the time when they decided to kill their brother Yosef. Yosef doesn't know anything about this. But perhaps he's naive, perhaps he's too honest. And even his father didn't realize that the brothers have in their heart this kind of feelings. And he sent Yosef to meet his brothers and to see what's going on with all the cattle. And Yosef goes to look for his brothers, and he finds them in Dothan. But from far away, the brothers are looking at him and the seeing him, and they said, oh, here is the guy of the dreamer, he's coming. Let's go and murder him, and we shall throw his body in one of the pits here, and that's it, and we will go to the father and we'll tell him that he was killed by an animal. When Yosef arrived, they captured him, and they really planned to do that. And they threw him in one of the pits, waiting for the decision, as though they will sit down like in a court, deciding that Yosef deserves as a person who is destroying their reputation in the eyes of their father. That's called Motzi Shemra, which means they want everything to go according to the law. They didn't realize that it's going rather according to their tormented character with jealousy. In the meantime, Reuven is stopping them for a while. And then Yehuda comes up. When they saw that there is a caravan of Ishmaelites, they said, you know what? Yehuda said, rather than killing him and murdering our father and spilling his blood, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and they will go to Egypt, and bye-bye Yosef, that's it. We will forget about him. And that's what they did. Suddenly they saw the Midianites. They sold Yosef to the Midianites for almost nothing, and the Midianites ended up selling Yosef as a slave to the Ishmaelite, who sold him to Potiphar, who was a minister of Paro in the land of Egypt. Yosef was an excellent servant because of his natural honesty. He pleased everyone there in the house of Potiphar. And Potiphar grew so much in respecting him, and he gave all the responsibility of his house in his hands. Yosef had somehow some kind of good time. In the meantime, all this is the separation from his father Yosef, his father Yaakov, who could not live with the fact that Yosef has been killed. And he mourned for him incessantly. He mourned for him all this time. Our sages said that when a person mourns for someone more than 12 months, it means that the guy is not dead yet. But he thinks he's dead. And that's what happened to Yaakov. All these years Yaakov was mourning for his son Yosef. How terrible this is. But it's also terrible for Yosef. In the house of Potiphar he had some good time, but there was a problem. The wife of Potiphar fell in love with the beautiful son of Yaakov, Yosef, who was a beautiful, handsome man. So what happened? She came to him. She was infatuated with him. And she requested from him to practically be with her, to sleep with her. And he refused. He's the son of Yaakov. Yosef is not the guy to give in to his evil temptations. And first he said no and no and no repeatedly, until finally she came and she held him. And he says, how can I do this to God? And I shall commit this kind of terrible sin, besides the sin that I will commit against your own husband, who gave everything in my hands. she finally ended up taking his coat, which she snatched away from him, and she went and she committed the most terrible crime by telling everyone and to her husband that Joseph was the one who came to her and she wanted practically to rape her. Well, they took Joseph. I mean, Potiphar did not believe, or maybe he believed a little in his wife. He knew that his wife is a little bit light-headed, but he had no choice. So they took Joseph, they put him in prison, and in prison he spent years in a pit. Nevertheless, the personality of Joseph was so belovable. Everyone respected him in that terrible place. And the one in charge of that prison gave everything in the hands of Joseph. And Joseph was extremely respected all these years, even though he was also in prison. In the meantime, there were two very important gentlemen who were caught also and put in prison. The minister of the one who was in charge of giving the cup of wine to Pharaoh was put in prison because of some reason, and also the baker, the minister of the baking program in Egypt. And both of them had a dream and did not know the interpretation. And Joseph came to them and he said, "You have a dream? Go ahead, tell me please. Who knows, maybe God will suggest to me a good interpretation." And Sarah Mashkim is telling him his dream, and Joseph tells him, "Don't worry, in a very short while you're going to be free and reinstated again as the man in charge of giving the cup to Pharaoh." What about the baker? He also interpreted his dream, but unfortunately he told him that in a short while they are going to execute him by hanging. That's exactly what happened. Now the minister of the cup of wine is out, but he forgets about Joseph. 2 more years in prison. Poor Joseph is living a life of hell in prison. A man like Joseph. But after 2 years, Parashat Miketz, Pharaoh had a dream. Very big dream, and he felt it is something that has to do with the future of Egypt. At the time, Pharaoh was a very wise man. He called up upon his ministers, who were very smart people. But everyone gave him a different interpretation, so Pharaoh did not believe them. Finally, the minister of the cup of wine rose and he said to him, "I remember now that there was a Hebrew servant, a Hebrew slave in prison, but he was so intelligent that he was able to interpret properly our dreams." And he told him everything. So they called up Joseph to come, maybe he can give the interpretation to Pharaoh. Joseph was brought, cleaned up, washed up, and everything to get him ready to stand before Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to him, "I heard that you are smart enough to interpret the dreams. Here is my dream." And he told him the dream. And Joseph said to him, "Whatever God will tell me, I shall tell you." Which means he doesn't know any interpretation, but maybe God will suggest something to his mind. And the Pharaoh tells him the famous dream about the cows, the fat cows, the very slim cows, and more. 7 cows here, 7 cows there. We all know the story as written in the Torah. And Joseph says to him, the seven fat cows, they represent 7 good years of plenty, that they shall come to the land of Egypt and the whole world. But immediately after, the 7 lean cows represent 7 terrible years of practical famine and starvation. Therefore, I suggest, Joseph is saying to Pharaoh, make sure you have a special person wise enough to take care of Egypt and to do whatever has to be done before this happens. Pharaoh immediately understood that this is a man that is of excellent and great intelligence. And he said to him, you said I should choose someone? There is no one as smart as you are. You have the Spirit of God in you. I shall make you second to me. Instantly, Joseph, from being a servant, from being a slave, he becomes practically a king, the most powerful man in Egypt. And Joseph got to work. Make sure with the 7 years of plenty that already begun, well, we have to assemble everything and to prepare the world for the next 7 years. He did it with such great wisdom that Pharaoh was elated by the choice that he made for nominating Joseph to be the most powerful man in Egypt, practically a viceroy. The whole world was practically, they felt in the years of famine, the world was in terrible situation. But they heard that in Egypt there is salvation. And every king is sending his servants to go and purchase whatever they can in order to survive. Among them were also the brothers of Joseph, sent by their father Jacob to go to Egypt also and to buy as much food as possible. The brothers come to Egypt. They saw Joseph standing, being the ruler of Egypt. Joseph, as soon as he saw them, he recognized them, being his brothers, but they did not recognize him. And the story goes on. He invites them, and then he gives them back the money. He puts it in their sacks, and they all went, having all the food that they wanted, plus the money they didn't know. The only problem is that Joseph inserted in one of the sacks, the sack Binyamin's one, and he puts in it the cup of the very special cup that he had. And then he sends his messenger to them, telling them that they stole it. Yehuda comes up as the representative of the family, and he says to him, no way, we are not thieves. If you find it in our sacks, we are willing to become all slaves to your master. And he said, well, let's see. And he searched, and in the bag of Binyamin, he finds the cup. Oh my God. Yehuda and all his brothers, they immediately started to mourn for what's happening. And they said, this is because of the sin that we have committed against our brother Joseph. So they decided to go back with the messenger of Joseph to Egypt, to Joseph. Now they did go, by the way, without taking Binyamin with them. That happened in the second time. When they came back, then Joseph insisted that they should bring Binyamin, which was a terrible decision to be made by Yaakov. And the brother Yehuda says to him, Father, if you don't give us Binyamin with us, he's not going to be able to, we cannot purchase anything. So you want us to die of starvation? According to the literal meaning of the Torah, because there are other explanations. And having no choice in the matter, Yaakov sent Binyamin with them. And that's when they came again to Joseph, and Joseph gave them a lot of honors and everything. But he did this terrible, it's a false problem, it's a false situation. He puts the bag, in the bag of Binyamin, he puts the cup, his personal cup, and they left, not knowing that they have the cup of Joseph. And Joseph sends the messenger, and the messenger finds in the bag of Binyamin, and all of them come back to Joseph. And Joseph says to them, no problem. All of you are free, you can go back. The only one who did this kind of sin against me, who stole the cup, will stay with me as my servant. And they said, what? Yehuda, at that time, beginning with the Parashat Vayigash, last week's Parasha, he came up with tremendous readiness to fight. But wait a minute, the question is, why would you fight? You did tell the messenger that if it is found by you, by any one of you, all of us will go to become slaves. The problem is, thinking that if we become slaves, we prefer to become slaves because that will be a great atonement for the sin that we have committed against our brother Yosef. And at least we will not see our father in his terrible despair. But now he's taking Binyamin, and Binyamin did not take part of our crime. That means the reason is not because of that. And that's why he decided to come and practically to face all the army of Egypt. And according to the legend given to us by our sages, that Yehuda was capable of destroying all the land of Egypt. So when he was in great anger and speaking to Yosef, and he says to him, Ki kamocha ke Pharaoh, I can destroy you and your master Paro. That's when Yosef decided to reveal finally his identity to his brothers, because he could not take it anymore. He loved them, but he wanted to try them. He wanted to see how they behave now. Knowing what he went through with them because of them, so now he wants to see if there was a change in their hearts. And he sees now that they are willing to sacrifice everything for their brother Binyamin. My brothers are becoming better, thank God. Well, let's see further. He invites them, come in, I am Yosef, your brother. Tell me, is my father still alive? Meaning, according to the commentators, that the reason he told them if he is alive is because he wanted to tell them, how can he stay alive after what you have committed against me? That was a terrible rebuke, for which our sages said, the Torah first says, "Velo yachelu echav la'anot oto ki nivhalu mipanav," and the brothers could not even answer. They stood petrified, not knowing what to say. Our sages said, woe to us if the brothers were not capable of even answering and accepting the rebuke that was terribly falling on them. How can we withstand the rebuke of God himself when he is telling us about whatever sins we have committed in our life? But Yosef became suddenly the good brother, and he says to them, don't worry, it's not you, it's not your crime. God did everything, and he did it, he corrupted you, he made you corrupt for the purpose of his plans. At first, God is the one who did do everything to me, so that I can be the one who will save you from the famine. Perhaps he also knew for the future, for the building of the Jewish people standing at the mountain of Sinai. All this was the plan of God. Because the question is, how is it possible to understand logically that the brothers of Yosef, the children of Yaakov, who were known to be very righteous, being the fathers of the Jewish nation, how could they commit such a crime that even a normal person would not in every case commit? We all know that jealousy exists in everyone. Nobody can escape jealousy. You could always say, how is it possible among brothers? Oh no. The Zohar says in Parashat Metzorah, Let kin'a ela birchimuta. The greatest kind of jealousy is among those whom we love. Which means it's very possible that you love someone and yet you will be jealous of him. Jealousy is the lot of everyone. The problem is, why is it that God put it in our heart? If it is so bad, is because He wants us to overcome jealousy. That's how we accomplish the purpose to be totally perfect, is by overcoming that which is considered to be evil. So now the question is, how is it possible that the brothers committed such a thing? So we already said that the best answer is that it is the doing of God, because there is a reason, there is a plan, there is a future, and because of that future He corrupts everything. But the brothers throughout the years have already repented, they were so sorry because of what happened to their father, what they have caused him. Throughout all the years, they did not even drink wine. Our sages said that they did not drink wine all these years, which, by the way, they said that even Joseph also did not drink any wine. Knowing the misery and the terrible distress by which Yaakov, their father, lived. When finally they encountered Yosef and they saw their brother, they were full of repentance, but Yosef wanted more. And here is something that happened. He invites them, he brings them, he makes a special feast for them, and then he started to give gifts. He took Binyamin, his younger brother, and he gives him 5 beautiful garments. To the rest of his brothers, he gives each one of them one. He also gave 300 monies of silver to his brother Binyamin. What's going on? How can he do the same thing for which he was a sacrifice? For which he suffered so much, how he would do that now for them? Our sages said in Masechet Megillah on page 13, no, page 16. It says, Vayhi efshar, davar shenitzta'er bo oto tzaddik yikashel bo. How is it possible that this righteous man that is Yosef, who suffered so much because of the jealousy of his brothers, that he would commit himself this kind of crime? Our sages said that there is a reason, that he wanted to give a hint to Binyamin that from his descendants there will be someone who is coming from his tribe, that is Mordechai, who will also be wearing 5 kinds of beautiful garments, as we read in the Megillah of Purim. But between you and me, is this possible to take it as conceivable? I mean, I understand the hint to Binyamin is beautiful, but what about to answer the question vis-a-vis the jealousy that he commits against his own brothers? The answer is the following. To my humble opinion, the Torah does not tell us anything about this. The Torah does not tell us that the brothers of Yosef became inflamed again because of jealousy. No, there was no jealousy. At that time, they understood why he gave 5 garments to Binyamin. Because he wanted to test them. He wanted to see if they are going to start. That means they did not perfection their traits of character. That means, but by not reacting with hatred or with jealousy regarding that, that means they have fixed the problem, they have repaired it. And repairing something that is awful, that is in our heart anyway, in our nature, that's the meaning of perfection. When you repair something that was evil and you make it good, that's when we know you are the best. And that's what God prefers. That's why our sages said at the end of Masechet Berachot that b'makom sheba'alei tshuva omdim en tzadikim gmurim yicholim la'amod. On the stage upon which the one who repented from his deeds properly and sincerely is much higher than even the very righteous man from the beginning till the end. How is it possible? I mean, a righteous man who never sinned is not to be compared to someone who sinned so much before and yet he repented? Yes. Why? Because the one who repented after committing a certain kind of crime, and now he repented and he changed himself to become a new person, is a person who will not commit anymore the same sin. Impossible. That's perfection. Whereas you cannot be sure, you cannot guarantee that even a very righteous man, from the beginning till a very old age, he could still stumble, he could still fall into some kind of perversion or whatever will happen to him. But a person who has repented properly will not go back to his crime. And therefore, that's the utmost perfection. And that's why our sages were so right. And that's what happened to the brothers of Yosef. They repented. Not only they repented, they felt a terrible suffering throughout the years. And finally, when they saw the same thing happening, that they committed against their brother is committing against them, and yet they did not react in any way, only with love, understanding, and everything is fine. Now we know that the brothers of Joseph are the true fathers of the tribes of Jacob, the tribes of Israel. And that's why before the death of Yaakov, as we read in Parashat Vayhi, Yaakov is blessing each one of the tribes, each one of the brothers. He did not mention anything that having to do with the crime of jealousy that they committed against Yosef. Because he also knew, after he got back the power of prophecy, he also knew that this was the plan of God. They had no choice in the matter. So he blesses them. And he blesses them properly, each one according to his character. But when he asked them, did you commit any crime? They said, well, you know, our father, that we don't have even one sin. She'en banu shum het. If you check in the names of the tribes, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, you will not find the two letters, het and tet, which mean a sin, het. That means, which means we have absolutely no sins in us. It was something very difficult to understand. But now we can understand that whatever they did was the work of God. But after they demonstrated such repentance, that they become really the paroxysm of perfection to everyone. Let this lesson be for all of us, that despite the fact that we have jealousy, we should never make a case or any crime because of it. We should rather work in our life to overcome it and to also deal with our brothers, Yehudim, with love and understanding and even perfection. Shabbat Shalom U'Borach.